Didn't get down here. Ah, heck, it's on the way. Where are eggs? That's... I do want to keep a good stock of potatoes for... There's sweet pepper. Did I harvest all of the potatoes already? Like I said, I do want to keep... That is our
Everything in
destination for
order?
now.
Yep.
But, anyway, 7. Final Fantasy 7. Overrated, but also overhated. And it's one of those things where 7 is a game that I'm really excited for the remake because I haven't even stopped. Every time I inevitably have to start over, I always find something new. A little piece of character dialogue from an NPC, or making a different choice and seeing how it works. It's a game that you can play different ways for practically your entire life. Or at least the entire life of somebody who was, who's about my age, who, was in the target kind of demographic when it came out and was kind of in my, preteen slash teen years. I forget exactly how old I was, and I'm not going to bother doing the math because it's too late for that here. It's like 9:30 here, and my math part of my brain is just like, I cannot brain right now, I has the dumb. So, but, I mean, it's one of those things where you can set out to play it a different way each time. You have, at the very least, 4 love interests that you can go out on a date with halfway through the game. And put in hours of work just to do that. I mean, and that's just at core base, There's so much things that
Still a bit of a walk from here.
you can do differently. The way you equip your party with materia, or, all of that good stuff. It's just, you can play that game and never have it be the same game for you for an entire lifetime. That's just it. The customization is so deep that you would never have to do that. You would never have to play it the same way if you didn't want to.
Well, here we are.
Say your prayers. Get lost.
Nothing to it.
So I'm actually really excited for the remake of that, just because it's going to be a new way to play it. This market to be like, well, we're remaking it and we're doing things better and nothing is sacred because that stuff was crap. And it's just like, you know what? They actually are treating the original with respect, which gives me a lot of hope for the project.
Stay down!
I mean, just look at Peter Molyneux when it came to Fable. It's just like, yeah, the last one was utter trash, but this one is going to be great. And then the next time around, it's like, yeah, that last one was utter trash, but this one is going to be great. You can only do that so many times, Peter, And I know Peter Molyneux is like the just go-to punching bag for this kind of thing, but it's not just him.
Thing I need now. Eyes peeled, mouth closed. Good shot.
Hey, where'd you learn that one, Noct? Let's go. Yep.
So anyway, I mean, the fact that they're respecting the source material and saying this is going to stand side by side. It's going to be a new way for people to experience it who have experienced it before. It's going to be a modern take on a true classic, essentially, is what it boils down to. Is they're treating the original like a classic, and it really is. It is one of the defining games of many of our lives. I mean, and it's nothing to sneeze at in any way, shape, or form. Sweet pepper. Well, how am I on sweet peppers? Yeah, I got 6 of them. I should probably pick up some more. Just so that I have some. We'll go that way. I mean, I can always
Everything
buy
in order?
more, but they're literally
Yep.
free and it's
All right.
literally on the way, so... But, anyway, to actually treat the source material with the due respect it deserves makes me believe that they're really doing this out of a love for it, not as a cash-in. I mean, this is something that, by the time they announced it, it had already been in secret development for like 3 years. And they were lying to people about it, saying like, no, we're
Where do
not
we go
doing
from
that.
here?
And, you know, we'll examine it in the future and all that kind of stuff. And there they were, just working on it in secrecy, which is kind of nuts because this is an industry where the news isn't so much news as like who can get the leak first. You know? Like, this is like the entire, like, Lucasfilm buyout with Disney, where it's just like this stuff had been in talks for, what was it, 5 years at that point or something like that, or something, and they had just kept a lid on it. I mean, when you talk about the media that we consume, half of the media we consume is, you know, news about the media we consume. When the entire thing is centered around, you know, who can get the scoop first and that kind of stuff, keeping anything secret is practically impossible. So for Square to go out of their way and do just really such a fantastic job of hiding it, that they were working on this behind all of our backs, you know?
Everything in
To,
order?
Yep.
to start doing this and start making it and all that stuff and actually have something somewhat to show for it when they announced it, unlike Final Fantasy 15 here. It was just that was kind of mind-blowing in its own right. Now don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy 15, they made mistakes. They showed things off before the character designs were even finalized. That's just the beginning and end of it. It's just, so when people were just like, well, where's this game
The color's amazing.
for these 10 years, you know? It's just like they showed it off before there was even a game to show off. I mean, heck, the guy who plays Core in this game was the driver, and they recast him because Ignis hadn't been created yet. I mean, the Regalia, if you look at those initial Final Fantasy Versus 13 trailers, looks nothing like this. This looks like a real honest-to-goodness car. I mean, it's a fancy car, don't get me wrong. It's definitely got that going for it. But it's not the kind of crazy style of thing the Regalia was in those initial trailers, where it was something like, this is something you're going to find in Dubai and nowhere else, you know? Heck, I'll just hoof it there. Let's see here. We can do that. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Oop, it's this way. But, oh heavens, that is further than I anticipated. We're not leaving the car that far behind, not when it's this late in the day already.
Everything in order?
Yep.
All right.
So, I mean, when it comes right down to it, it's just like, well, you know, why did this game take 10 years to make? Well, because frankly, a good portion of that 10 years was just not happening. I mean, it was just...
Do we have to walk?
That... I think I drastically miscalculated what they thought 500 feet was. Alrighty, we are going to just go to the next map point here. We are going to... get more eye gear route here.
Ready when you are, Ignis.
Off we go.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe attack some beasties. But, I mean, so when it comes right down to it, how long do AAA games take to make? At least 5 years. 5 to 7 years is usually pretty standard. And with the things that were happening in development with Versus 13, it's not really surprising that it took that extra 3 years, because 13 was overall a hallway. And so they didn't have the same kind of wide open spaces for the most part that are a given in here. The entire game was designed to be a hallway. It wasn't a bad hallway, but you have to acknowledge it was a hallway. So when it comes right down to it, they asked for a whole bunch of optimizations to make a game that was a hallway. And for a game that is decidedly not a hallway, the engine was unworkable. So when they were writing an engine is something that you don't just write for no reason. An engine is something that you're building an investment. And they built their investment around Final Fantasy XIII. They made an engine that was good for Final Fantasy XIII and nothing else. Which is not a good way to build an engine, because unless if you're going to be doing Final Fantasy XIII for the foreseeable future, please no. It's just not... Most 13 was a hallway, I mean that. For the oh, for crying out loud.
Won't keep you in the dark.
There we go. I'm hoping it's recording this now here. Anyway, for the most part, Final Fantasy XIII was a hallway. The parts that weren't a hallway were generally actually fairly small. I mean, if you look at the wide open spaces in here, it's just that
Sleeping
much.
out under the stars tonight.
that much bigger of an area than the big areas of Final Fantasy 13. Like, 13 was one where their big world, where it finally opened up, was made of a lot of small sections. Let's see here. You know what? We're gonna do this, because we've got so much of this stuff. But, so I mean, when you optimize an engine for those kinds of small areas, relatively speaking, admittedly, some of them had some really great gigantic vistas and that kind of thing, but it's just not the same as what they're doing here. Yay, breaded cutlet with tomato. Okay, I like. Got some
Hey, this one's pretty
food
good.
in there.
I know. I dig it too.
You know, that's nice enough. That's kind of nice. You know what? I kind of like this too. Not everything has to be selfies. Yeah, I'll pass on this one. You know what? Why not? Anyhow. It's just, like I said, it's one of those things where if you make it, if
Everything in
you
order.
build
Yep.
an engine
behind you.
around one game, you're not investing in anything. You're investing in one game, and that never ends well. Because if you try to apply that engine to anything else,
The hunt is on.
you're not gonna have a good time. Which is exactly what happened.
Yep.
They basically made it unusable for Final Fantasy Versus 13, which meant that for a good portion of 15's development, they didn't really have an engine. They would not have been able to make this game.
Outstanding, Nox.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Or rather, they would have been able to make this game, but it would have been like this area. Very small, very enclosed, very... You know, you can see forever and that kind of thing, but how much of it is actually accessible? Not a whole lot. So they really did need a new engine for this game, which is why it's kind of funny, because the engine that was used for 13 basically got dumped. It's just... It was an engine made for 13. And that's all it was good for, so they can't use it for anything else. Let's see here. Which way is the car? This way.
Real nice here.
Yeah.
So anyway, my top 5 favorite Final Fantasies. We've got 9, 10, 7, which I mentioned, you know, in my last video. This entire half-hour video thing is really limiting, to be honest. I know it's more easily digestible, but it does feel very limiting to me too. Oop. You know what? We're gonna go grab those peas before we do anything else. We are gonna quick grab whatever is over here. There is a mine here.
This will make a fine paint.
There we go.
Feels so sluggish. Yeah.
Anyway, so, like I said, 7, 9, 10, those are probably my top 3, and then, what else would be in my top 5? It's a big series, so, I mean, obviously I'm enjoying this one, but I won't say that I can really give it that kind of placement quite yet. I mean, I like what I've seen so far, don't get me wrong. But I literally haven't left the beginning area here, so... I can't honestly say that I really know everything the game has to offer.
Everything in order?
Yep.
But, I'll tell you which one is really the only one I hated. And that is 12. I hated 12. I hated all of the characters in 12. And honestly, even though I recognize that it's got some really great systems, the weapon system in that game is the best MMO weapon system I have ever seen. The weapon balance in that game is just downright amazing. I loved it for that. Or I loved that aspect of it, but the rest of that game just... 12 is one that has always been really polarizing. Either you love it or you hate it. And I just hate it. I hate Balthier. I think that everybody is so enamored with him because he's British and that's about it. Like, that's the entire thing that he seems to have going for him is, I'm the leading man, and it's just like, no, you really aren't. Please go drown in something unsavory. That's just what I want to do, is every time he opens his smug mouth, I just want to drown him in a puddle in the middle of Rabanastre or something like that, because it's probably Chocobo piss. Just... pardon my French, but I cannot stand him. And Fran is both the most useless character in the entire game, with the lowest stats all around of any character, to the point where guides basically say if you do have to use her, stick her with a gun, because it's the only weapon that doesn't rely on stats. And she has all of this really bad dialogue that's over-enunciated and is supposed to sound really sage, but just sounds really hollow and vapid, in my opinion. Just like, you can't sound sage just by over-enunciating. You have to actually have something of value to offer. And she just doesn't. She is literally the most useless character in the entire game, all around. And that's speaking including Vaan and Penelo. It's just... Vaan, I actually could have maybe gotten a little of something out of. He's obviously the character that is supposed to remain in your party at all times because he's got the best stats of anyone. High stats all around. But it's just like, he is one of those kind of things where it's like, oh, you know, he's a diamond in the rough, and it's just like, no, he really isn't. He never gets past the "your fleas will mourn you" stage. It's just... Oh look, he can see the same things Ash can see so that people don't think she's crazy. You know? I was really relieved to find out that he didn't actually end up with her, because he kind of looks like his brother kind of looks like her hubby, and they've got like these moments together, and it's like, no, you do not. So like, Penelo is there to be his love interest in the end, and that's like the only function she serves whatsoever. Is just like, hey, I'm going to be like here and another female character so that Vaan doesn't literally have to end up with the princess. Because that is not a thing that would actually happen. Hate to break it to anybody who's really big on fairy tales and that kind of thing, but Princess is not going to end up with a literal street rat. There are way too many expectations. It wouldn't even be her choice. Like, I hate to be that person, but it's just like, if you're talking about, like, when it comes to politics, you're just not going to have that choice. A princess is not going to have the choice to marry a commoner in that kind of environment. At any rate, like I said, it shows that that it had troubled development, because Vaan was actually the last character created and the first character actually designed. The writer wanted to do a story about Bosch, and that might have actually been something that I would have wanted to play. It would have been like, you know, Bosch is an older character, I want to examine him from the perspective of, you know, a guy who actually has a life. That's the thing about RPG heroes, is that none of them are, for the most part, old enough to have actually settled down and have a life, or any of that stuff. So it's just... You know, he wanted to examine that, and he was told, nah, nobody's gonna associate with him, just draw up some sort of, you know, whiny teenager or something. Kids love that. And it's just like... And they were unfortunately right, and I say unfortunately because Vaan is super popular in Japan, and that's one of the worst characters in Final Fantasy. Let's put it that way. If he's to be taken as the main character of that game, he is easily the worst main character of that game. There are things that I can get behind with him, but he doesn't seem to advance past that. He's Von Ratsbane for the entire game.
Give me the short version.
Brilliance cannot be summarized, I'm afraid.
Wanna bash some heads in?
You know it. Man.
Ooh!
You're on fire today!
No big deal. You like that?
Nice work. Smash.
I don't know why the first time I broke an appendage didn't work, but Oh, did I seriously?
We all good?
Better than
Yay.
good.
Good to go.
Okay.
Huh.
At any rate, and another thing about 12 is the combat systems are kind of broken. Like, okay, the actual weapon balance is good, but it, like, the loot system is something that some days I think it's actually a really good idea, and other days I think it's a really bad idea. Because you have to actively pass up loot all the time if you want to get the better stuff. And just, you know, in some ways that can be a good idea, because, like, oh, well, do you want a whole bunch of really junk items, or do you want, like, one really good item? The thing is that if you're gonna do it that way, you need to do it a little better that way. You have to actually make sure that, like, it doesn't, you know, cancel out when you leave the area, and that, you know, because the first item you pick up, then your entire counter resets. And if I
Breeze
recall,
feels good.
Indeed.
if I recall correctly, it's one of those things where if you leave the area, then it also resets. And the areas in that game can be pretty big, don't get me wrong. But it's still kind of crappy. Another thing that is super crappy is that the enemies are faster than you. So if you get something on your tail that you don't want there, you just better hope that you can leave the area real quick. Because that's what they did to hide the fact that range doesn't matter for enemies. Now, range matters for the party, because it's one of those things where if you're not exactly far enough away to, you know, hit something with a sword or something, you're not going to attack. Whereas enemies can attack you from 5 feet away. It just never really comes up because they're all faster than you are. Which means that you can't properly run away from something that's already attacking you. You have to fight it. And I'm sorry, but even though I don't run from battle all that often, the option is still appreciated. Especially when you get into a battle that you really didn't want to get into in the first place, and have no means of escape. Like those giant owlbear things that you run into basically right out the gate that are way over your head. Anyway, I am going to call this a session here, and I will continue in the next one.